Quinnipiac. As I said earlier, it's good to see everybody. Again, my name is Richard Hardy. I'm the chair of the Electoral Area Services Committee. Before we get started, first and foremost, again, thank you all for showing up here this morning. We do have exit doors in case of emergencies over to my left and over to my right. There's washroom facilities in the hallway just behind me. And yeah, again, just a reminder that this morning's meeting, again, it's great to have the public here, but in regards to public input, other than if you're a delegate, we just ask that you remain quiet and refrain from any distracting gestures. So we'll move forward into the agenda. We have a vote to receive the, sorry, do we have a receipt of the agenda? Thank you. All right, as we move into the agenda, first and foremost, I'd like to recognize the Comox First Nations unceded traditional territory in which we all live and work in the territory of the Comox peoples. Next, we're going to move into item B. Oh, sorry, perhaps CAO Russell Dyson has a couple of opening remarks as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, directors, and members of the public. Today, we anticipated that there were two items on the agenda that would attract quite a bit of attention. So the agenda has been split up in half. The first part will consider a number of regular matters as well as delegations and a staff report regarding a cell tower. The second half of the meeting will consider two matters, that being a subdivision proposal on Plateau Road and a home occupation involving water on Sackville Road. I just want to mention this because that second part of the meeting will commence at 12:30. So if you are here for either the Plateau Road matter or the Sackville Road matter, you can be sure that that will take place as of 12:30. That just enables us to receive two larger delegations today. So with that, Chair, I hand it over to you.
Thanks. So moving into delegations, I understand Hillary Jones is here to give a presentation. Just a reminder, Hillary, we normally give our delegates 10 minutes. So we'll start you at say 10:04, okay? Receive delegation. Thank you. Just hit the little button there on your microphone. There you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hillary Jones. I'm a resident of the Comox Valley, and I'm very concerned about these towers. I'm part of a group called VISTA, which stands for Vancouver Island Safe Tech Alliance. We were formed in November after learning that there was two proposed towers on ALR land. So I'm here today to give a presentation. I have given some information to the CVRD in the past about with references and credible scientific information about the harms that RF can do. And I'm here to hand deliver a hand copy as well for the public record in front of all the public. And I'd also just like to ask who here is opposed to the tower. Can I just see a show of hands?
So Hillary, again, just reminding you of the fact that you're talking to the Electoral Area Services Committee. Mm-hmm. And again, with regards to gestures or trying to get the public to be more vocal here is not what we're suggesting here. So okay, again, sure. Focus on the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. Okay. So there is lack of statutory compliance with this tower. Towers are not supposed to be allowed on ALR land. And is there an echo? Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so cell towers are not supposed to be permitted on non-farm. They're not to be permitted for non-farm use. They can impact pollinators, livestock, wildlife. So there's been a huge community opposition. So what I wanted to start off, by saying is local municipalities do actually have a say. I know that it's things, the federals, I said, has the final say, but local municipalities actually have a lot of influence here. ISA takes what they say to mean a lot. So municipalities are supposed to be protecting the public here. As the authority, you're supposed to be making an informed decision. And how can you do that when there's no long-term data? There's been a lack of full informed consent. None of the residents that we spoke to that lived within the 500 meters were shown any of the evidence that we're here today to present, including this one important study showing harm. So there is a community opposition. We did go out and we talked to the people that lived within 500 meters within the tower, and we found 48% were opposed. So we know that the public consultation period happened. We don't feel that it was a fair and just one because the public didn't really have an input. There was no opportunity for us to say no. There's been lack of information about insurability and liability. Despite repeated requests, we have not received the information about this. We've asked the property owner and tell us who has insurance coverage, and we've yet to receive this. Our research shows that no major insurer will cover EMR related claims. So this is just a quick slide here. 3 of the largest providers do not provide coverage for EMF or RF coverage. So our question is, does the Municipal Insurance Association also have exclusions such as this? And if so, we feel that the public cannot be subjected to a technology when there's risk of harm and there's no potential future compensation for these claims. So if there is no EMF or RF damage, and if harms do occur to livestock, pollinators, insects, plants, trees, or a person or their livelihood, who will be sued? Who will be paying for those damages of injury and loss of livelihood? Who's responsible? Who is liable? Is it the landowner? Is it with the cell phone tower on their property? Or is it the CVRD? Is it the committee members? Is it TELUS? There's no long-term proof that 5G is safe. Non-ionizing radiation can harm pollinators and impact agriculture. There's substantial evidence to back this up, and we've provided this to the CVRD. So solutions, there's a lot of good solutions. Wired connections are safer and more secure. We hope that the CVRD invests in wide brand infrastructure. Fiber to premises is much safer as long as there's no wireless signal involved. And fiber optics is being installed throughout the Comox Valley right now, including Comox. It's already at Ryan Road and Eleanor, or sorry, not Eleanor, Ryan Road and Anderton, and it's on its way to Eleanor. So the other solutions are landlines. You can forward your cell number to a landline. You can use adapters and with Ethernet cables. And if you're out in the backcountry and you need an emergency phone call, use a sat phone. Just keep it turned off because it does emit an RF radiation. So we're asking the board members today of the EASC to please protect the Comox Valley residents, both future and present. Protect the pollinators, the birds, the wildlife, the environment. Protect the local food producers, the farms, and their livelihoods by not granting a letter of concurrence today for this tower proposed for 1388 Eleanor Road. Thank you, and Marcus will be coming up next.
This slide. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Lüschen. I'm a certified EMF radiation consultant, electromagnetic radiation, trained by the Austrian Geovital Academy for Radiation Protection and Environmental Medicine. I measure man-made radiation in people's homes and their environment. I have translated German medical literature in the field of radiofrequency radiation. I attended seminars on man-made radiation, such as the 4-day International EMF Medical Conference 2021, which was attended by over 800. As former residents of Chartwell, Qualicum Beach, my wife and I had to move away because of a severe hypersensitivity to EMF radiation, which developed in Qualicum Beach due to the rapid rise in radiation pollution in the area. She struggled terribly with this man-made affliction and took its toll on the quality of our life. I will do a short demonstration using my German high-frequency radiation analyzer to illustrate that the air we live in is saturated with invisible electromagnetic radiation. I can easily obtain radiation readings from cell towers inside most people's homes. This is just a small sample. And Wi-Fi radiation penetrates, or cell tower radiation penetrates your home like butter. Okay. I will skip safety code 6 because help. Yeah, I want to go straight to this chart here. This is how natural or man-made radiation is measured. What counts are the peaks, as you see at the top. Industry likes to use the bottom. How they arrive at that number is by averaging everything and time averaging as well. They measure the space where nothing happens. It's only a tiny part, but it reduces that. So it's basically, I punch you and break your nose. I argue the power of my punch should average over a year. And therefore you cannot be hurt, as I really did not punch you hard over the entire year. Considering only average power. Does that make sense to anyone? Measuring average radiation protects industry, not the public. This is a graph from the Austrian Medical Association, Salzburg. And Dr. Oberfeld was heavily involved in this. On the left side, you see what happens to low frequency radiation in your brain. The middle is how it should be, is without any disturbance. On the right-hand side, you see what happens to your brain when it's under cell phone or wireless radiation, radio frequency radiation. It scrambles your brain. Sidepass Consulting handed out scientifically obsolete opinion piece called Statement of the Chief Medical Officer 2011, which refers to literature backing back to the 1990s, when most of technologies did not exist, such as 3, 4, and 5G. World's largest animal study on cell tower radiation confirms cancer. Why is Sidepass Consulting failing to hand the science out to you? There are hundreds of studies in the last few years.
So Marcus, again, just reminding our delegates that each delegation has 10 minutes and we're at that 10-minute mark. So if we can get you to summarize or finalize your final comments, we appreciate that.
Yes.
We have about a minute to wrap things up here.
I just wrap it up. From the International Doctors April 2012, signed by thousands of physicians, they say, we also call on everyone who cares about health and the environment, make wise consumer choices and help reduce exposure levels, favor wired communication technologies, inform yourself and pass this knowledge on to your family, neighbors, friends, and politicians. Get involved and make a difference so that the protection of human health and the environment is not left to and limited by commercial interest. Thank you. Oh, and I have one last thing. Is the 2020 medical consensus statement of the UK and international medical and scientific experts and practitioners on health and of ionizing radiation. It includes 10 medical groups and 5 science groups representing 3,500 physicians. And they say the end of the piece, urgent action is required to protect the health of human and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And Hillary, we'll invite you up to the podium as well. We'll open up any other directors have any questions for the delegates. Seeing no questions, I guess we'll vote on receipt. Thanks, Carrie. Thank you, Hillary and Marcus, for your presentation. Next, we'll invite Dr. Stephen Malthouse to come out and give a presentation. Thank you, Carrie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Stephen Malthouse. I'm a medical practitioner. I've practiced in Canada, in British Columbia for 43 years, and I'm the president of the Canada Health Alliance, which is an association of more than 5,000 members. Most of them are medical practitioners. And I wanted to take this opportunity today to, first of all, to thank you for having us here to give two sides of the story, but also to talk to you about the health aspects of cell towers. So this is what I see as really the difficult decision making that you might have to make. Is on the right hand side, we see that you want to make sure that people have access to 911 so they can call in case of emergencies, cell phone service might be improved, and that they have faster internet. And I think that's why these cell towers are really being promoted. But on the left hand side, you see that we have these health and fertility issues, which are well known to us as medical doctors. I've met patients, but also my colleagues and friends who have medical issues regarding EMF or electromagnetic fields, that these people have real symptoms, and there's no denying from my own personal experience that this is an issue for them. But there's also this issue of privacy and freedom, because many of these towers are going to are putting up, particularly when we get into 5G, from the perspective of collecting information. And so this is going to be an issue with regard to freedom and privacy. Legal and liability, I'm going to leave that with you, but I'm not sure who the liability will rest with if people are injured by these towers. But the bottom line is really the judicious use of our technology in a way that is least harmful to us, because we're not going to be giving up our cell phones. We know that. Now, why is business pushing this? And I think it's because of the bottom line, because if we told people how dangerous this was, people would actually probably put away their cell phones. In some cases, they'd stop wearing ear pods, that sort of thing, if they knew how bad it was. So it's bad for the bottom line in business. And that's why I believe you're not hearing the true story, the full story. Now, I'm going to give you a quick overview of 3, 4, and 5G. You probably know this. The G stands for generation. And this is to do with the frequency that is being put out by these different towers and other mechanisms. So if we look on this chart, I know it's very busy, but if you see right now, the tower is really in the 4G, but there's a perspective for 5G. 5G goes up, it's like your microwave. And how many people are going to put their hand in their microwave while it's running? Not many. But 4G will penetrate into humans, and so will 5G. Thing about 5G is different, is 5G will include all the 4G frequencies, but it will include its own frequencies. It will be going up into the microwave. And what that means is it will be using anywhere from 24 to 100 gigahertz frequencies. So this is where we're really going to get dangerous, but the 4G is dangerous enough. 5G requires that you have these little antennas, because it can't go very far because of the short wavelength. It doesn't travel far. So you're going to need to have these erected throughout your city, pretty much on every city block, if you're going to have 5G running through your city. Not very attractive, I would say. This is what it's really all about. 5G in the cities is gathering information. Information is like gold now, more valuable than gold. And that is really the underlying reason for this. I think the 911 and the increased faster cell service or faster internet service is really just a selling mechanism. But I think this is really what's behind it. And of course, we're going to have smart homes. You can't have smart homes without 5G. You need that big broadband, that width of broadband, to be able to collect the data, just to buy it, to market it, and to send things back as well. So from a military perspective, this is what we're looking at. It's surveillance, identification. But let me come to the health aspects of this, because this is what I'm here really for to speak to you today. The rest was kind of like a primer. This is about electromagnetic fields. Can they be dangerous to humans? Now, in this bioinitiative 2012, which was updated in 2022, they looked at all the studies on EMF. Could these be dangerous? And if we look at neurological damage, 74% of the studies showed there was danger. If we look at genetic damage, we found that 68% showed that there was danger to people who were exposed. And then in free radical damage, which is oxidation of tissues, maybe you've heard of this. One of the reasons people take vitamin C is to prevent this, but 91% of the studies showed that there was a negative effect. And if you look at it like this, I know, again, this is another busy graph, but if you look at on the right-hand side, you see the number of studies that have shown the issue with regard to brain tumors and other tumors of the body. We've seen cardiac issues in the muscles, the arrhythmias. We've seen hypertension, vascular effects, calcium metabolism abnormalities, oxidative damage, reproductive fertility effects, and sleep, memory, learning. Many of these things, as well as your immune system function, can be disrupted by EMF. So really, electromagnetic fields, 4G, it ticks all the boxes. So what about people who are near the cell towers? Well, they've had multiple studies on this. You may not have heard of them, or perhaps you'll get them in the literature, but even some of the most recent ones in 2021 show that people living near these towers have a higher mortality rate. They have increasing cancers. They have all sorts of things such as sleep disturbance, fatigue, headaches, and so on. And many other countries are doing this when we're lagging behind. And here's an example. If you look on the left, these are 4G towers. These are placed on the top of a long-term care home, right? And on the right, you'll see those little black ones there. They're just starting to put up 5G next to it. And this is a reading on the right-hand side that was taken that distance away from those 4G towers. 5G is not active. That's 4G tower. And those are the readings. Now, if you look at the white line at the bottom, you want to be below that for safety. That's for the conventional safety measures that we're all given. And that is what they're actually showing, that far away. So you can see it's not just living within, a short distance. You can be a long way away and still be irradiated. And of course, we're interested in our children, aren't we? And if we look at some of the studies that have been done on children, we see that there are elevated miscarriage rates. There's all sorts of things such as obesity, asthma connections. We also see attention deficit hyperactivity disorder connected to exposure to cell towers. Here's when we look at children, we see that there are some problems in that they have thinner skulls. So they have more water content in their brains. So if they're using cell phones, in other words, they're getting exposed to EMF, they will be more sensitive than adults. Stem cells, these are undifferentiated cells in children, and these are very sensitive to this type of exposure, and also other things such as reproductive organs. We have to understand that these children are immature. They're much more susceptible, and there's still the changes. They have many more life years to go than we do as old folk. And so they're the ones that are going to have to bear the brunt of us making a mistake in our decisions here today. And we look at cell phone use in young children increasing, and the number of tumors that are occurring in the brains of these kids, it's really going off the charts. We're seeing other things happening as well. This is not safe. Here's an example of a woman, just by using her cell phone and using her mouse with her right hand, you can see the changes just there in her hands, which disappeared after she stopped using those two things. The human being is like an antenna. This is why we see that the skin can be reactive to these things, but also we'll see that the military is using this for that particular reason. I'll point that out in just a moment. But if you live near a cell tower, this is what happens. That first of all, you can't see it, you can't hear it. In a lot of ways, you can't feel it, right? Unless you're hypersensitive. But the damage is on a cellular level. It takes time. And this is why, and it's cumulative. It means every day that you're in it adds to the effects. It's not like every day you start from zero. And there are studies supporting this. You don't have to go far to find 100 studies, 1,000 studies. They emphasize the danger of living near cell towers. And here's, for example, what can it do to our foliage on our trees? There's a tree that was exposed to that cell tower on the top of that building. You wouldn't want to be in that building. And this is what happened after 9 years. Now, if you think about that, what does it mean? It means that anyone who's growing things in the area, a farm, for example, could have their produce affected. It also means that when you dry out trees like that the risk of wildfires are much higher. And the other thing, this is only 9 years. You can imagine what it would be like at 20 years. And this is a small study that was done by school kids where they tried to grow watercress exposed to Wi-Fi. And they found the ones on the left were unexposed and the ones on the right were exposed. Now, that's just the children doing it in school. But if you look at, this was actually replicated by some real scientists, and they came up with exactly the same results. We look at bees. When we work our way up to the 5G, which is on the right-hand side, we see the penetration into the bee is much greater. And it has effects such as confusing them in their ability to navigate, to pass message, to do messaging between each other, but also decrease the colony size. So beekeepers are not going to be very happy if they have a tower in their backyard. And of course, birds, we see the same thing. Imagine a microwave exposure on an egg. It cooks the egg. And this is what they're finding is they have decrease in the population of birds when they've been exposed to microwaves, but other type of 4G. The other issue, of course, is it confuses them. There are bees, there are birds and insects, which have a special thing behind their brain, which allows them to use the magnetic fields of the earth to migrate. And this has been shown to be affected by exposure to towers. And of course, you ask the government about 5G or, the FDA, they've come out and say no real problem, but of course they don't have any research whatsoever into the impact on the brain, general health, reproduction, children's ability to work in school. And, but even the military is recognizing that 5G can be put to work. Each of those different frequencies has a different effect on the human. And they're using actually 95 gigahertz, which is in the 5G range, to create something which has been used, actually was used in Australia not long ago, called an active denial system. This is where they actually heat people up within just a few moments to 130 degrees. It will disperse a crowd. And what they're saying is certain of the frequencies have specific effects on the human. 60 will boil water. 95, as mentioned here, will make people run for cover. This is how they're using this for crowd control. And I'm just getting to the end of my talk here, but the two recent studies about 5G I wanted to point out, because there have been no studies on 5G. And these two just came out recently. They were published this year, showing that people who worked or lived close to 5G towers, in other words, these were workers putting together 5G on the top of a building. And then the second was about a couple that lived underneath a 5G tower. And this goes through what they call microwave disease. This is pretty much the best we have with 5G so far with regard to its effects on humans, and yet they're intending to roll out and have already rolled out 5G in many different places. Of course, doctors, we don't always get it right. We have a history of making mistakes, as we have here, but we do have a couple of principles. One is a precautionary principle that we do not give a therapy to someone if we don't know that it's safe. If we don't have evidence of safety, no matter what the benefit could be, we don't rush in. That's called the precautionary principle. The second thing I'm sure you've all heard of, the Hippocratic Oath, is to do no harm. It's very similar. It means the first thing we want to make sure is we're not harming people before we try to benefit them. Of course, there's the ratio. You have to take that into account. But I think here, if you don't know the harms, the level of harms, it's impossible really to determine what the benefit harm ratio is. And although some people are hypersensitive, we are actually all sensitive. Everybody here in this room would be sensitive to EMF in different degrees. Children, pregnant women, small animals, birds, and insects are most important. So this is really the bottom line here. On the right side, we have the tower. We have maybe 911. We have faster internet. But on the left side, we have our children, we have our animals, we have nature. And we have to today decide which is more important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Again, with regards to clapping, disruptive gestures, we just ask that you refrain from doing that. Thank you very much. I do understand we have one more delegate. Oh, sorry. Before our next delegate comes up, Director Arbor did have a question for the doctor. Dr. Stephen, if you wouldn't mind coming back to the podium.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Malthouse, for coming to speak with us and for your presentation. So I wanted to talk a little bit or have a question around what is the sort of acceptable risk in a way, right? Because I think obviously we've received a lot of correspondence on this, and it's not my first go around. I lived that issue on Hornby, and I also in the last term, which led us to create an antenna policy for the regional district. So my question as a doctor, like it's all around acceptable risk and how doctors kind of view that. So, a lot of the things you listed are quite likely. I'm really in the camp of people who believe that, as you say, we don't always get things right. And your example of cigarettes was perfectly correct. We all used to smoke in pubs and all public institutions and the rest of it, and we don't do that anymore. So we've learned from that. But in regards to policy, carbon, or many of us drove cars here. We haven't banned gas cars yet, and we're killing biodiversity at a rate that's probably much higher than EMF through our global emissions. So there's a lot of risk and threats that we're facing. So as a doctor, can you comment on why you believe EMF particularly should be considered a greatest threat? Because right now it's a bit like cigarettes. A number of years ago in the 60s, or cigars, 92% of people use cell phones and cell phone technology. So I'd like to hear your comments, how you weigh those different.
Well, I think the cigarettes is a good example because, doctors, we'd sit there smoking a cigarette and we'd telling our patient to stop smoking, right? And of course, when they had lots of evidence that smoking was bad for your health, and particularly with regard to lung cancer, but also vascular disease, despite having the science, it took a long time before smoking was banned in restaurants and so on, or the real recognition of it. And why was that? It's because we were given a smokescreen by the corporations, by the business, by the people selling cigarettes. And I think we have to be very careful. Always keep in our mind what is the motivation behind people who are defending EMF towers and those that are opposing it. We have to look at their motivations. I think that's honest. So I think that we're in the same situation now. I think it's very similar. I think that we're being misled here in that, as I mentioned briefly, I think that the main idea behind these towers, particularly the 5G, is for information gathering. It's not to give you faster internet. That's what people think it's about. And and the same thing with the 911 issue, which I think we've shown there are alternatives that, people are being sold by that. But the real issue is the collection of data. But having said that, to just go on to your question, which is how do you know, what's the risk-benefit ratio? Because that's really what it's about, risk-benefit. The problem is if you don't know the harms, then it's very hard to create that ratio. That's tough. So you try to weigh all the benefits. I have a cell phone and I drive a gas car, but at the same time, I'm trying to balance that versus the EMF effects. And also, are there alternatives? So when we have informed consent, we say, do you need it? What are the benefits? What are the risks? And what are the alternatives? And we have to examine all those things with informed consent. So I think it's the same thing here. But I would say based on the weight of evidence, just from me looking into it, not even being a scientist in the field, and my own experience as a physician, is that this is a very real problem that is being disguised by the lack of science, which in fact is there. So I would say, I don't know if this is answering your question, Daniel, well enough, but I think that the evidence now is that if we allow these towers to be put up, we're going to have a tower everywhere, for one thing. This is just the start. And then we're going to have 5G rolled out. But I think the issue is that if we don't force better technology by denying lousy technology, which is dangerous, then it will just continue. It's a bit like if you can make a cheap product and no one complains about it and it hurts a lot of people, you'll just keep making a cheap product, right? And I think this is what we're looking at here. This is a cheap product. We could do better. And based on that, that's how I would make my decision. Okay.
Treasurer Green.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your presentation. I am, however, struck by the fact that the barn door is wide open. The horses have left. I want to know what your opinion is about the fact that we're pretending we have some territorial jurisdiction in the modern age. We do not. We don't have any national sovereignty over low Earth satellites. We've got Elon Musk, Starlink, and at least 4 other companies putting cluster satellites up there to bombard us 24/7 from outer space. We have no control. The horses are over the hill now. They're gone. So I just want to know how you think that plays into this conversation.
That's a really good question because yes, more Starlink, they're going up every day. I don't know if you've ever seen them go up. They kind of go boop, 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 boop across the sky when they're being launched. But this is a problem because with satellite 5G, it's the same. Now there may be satellite 5G, which can actually reach down to people directly, but there will also some that will become to towers, right? But good question. How's horse out of the barn? That's the question. Is the horse really out of the barn and gone, or can we get the horse back into the barn? That's really the question. In other words, what we've put up, we can take down. But I don't think that we should compound that by making mistakes here where we do have control, which is on the ground. But I'm in complete agreement with you. I think putting up Starlink 5G satellites, which also have a military back end to them, just let you know, that I don't think that is good for humanity. And it's a bit like, putting up dust into the atmosphere to cool the earth off. Not the smartest thing to do.
Any more comments or questions from the directors? Thank you, Dr. Stevens. So
Thank you very
vote
much.
on receipt of Dr. Stevens' presentation. Carried. Thank you. All right. Do we have a motion to receive the next delegation? Thank you, Carrie. So we'll invite Leanne Craig McCulloch to come up and Mark as well.
So
Oh, Mark's online.
Mark's gonna be online and we're gonna start with her. We're gonna let her run for 5 minutes if that's okay, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, so Mark, you're going to start.
Can you see my screen?
We sure can, Mark.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. So I'm only got 5 minutes, so please feel free to pull on me and give me a warning, and I'll just make one final comment. So then Leanne Gray can talk. So I'm talking to you today. Thank you very much for having me. I'm talking to you today to provide additional evidence or support for writing a letter of non-concurrence for the proposed tower at Eleanor Road. I am a oh, no screen's not advancing.
Marsh, maybe you can just turn on your presentation or slideshow. We've still got it sort of in
Oh,
format.
is that better?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, and I've also sent you a letter, so there's more information in that. So I'm a retired biologist. I have a master's of science degree and over 30 years in original research in cancer research and ecosystem toxicology. And since retiring, I've looked intensively at the wireless radiation issue. This is a depiction of what the radiation looks like coming from the tower. And as you can see, it goes a wide distance. It's not just very close to the tower, but also spews up and down. International scientists have say that this has been proven to be harmful for humans and the environment. We have over 400. There aren't that many scientists working on this right now, so that is a substantial number. I want to bring this up, two slides here from Health Canada. And I hope if there's a proponent that speaks and says, oh, Health Canada says it's safe, ICID says it's safe, I hope you will come back to me so I can rebut those statements. I've studied this intensively, including the last time that Safety Code 6 was revised. If you go to Table 5 of Safety Code 6, you can clearly see that it is based on 6 minutes. Not long-term, not 24/7, 6 minutes. This is for cell tower radiation. This is, we're talking about 5G exposures. This is Health Canada's own systematic review. And what they found was that there were no human studies that were assessed for endpoints such as cancer or any other adverse health outcome. They have based the 5G exposure safety limit on 10 studies. The longest term study was 30 minutes. You have to ask for this report. Health Canada is not putting it on its website. So basically they have no science supporting the safety of 5G. World Health Organization, possible carcinogen 2011. Now independent researchers are calling for a known carcinogen. We know there's science with tying in cell phones and with breast cancer and sperm damage. We have electrosensitivity, you've heard about that. No health studies conducted in Canada on possible health effects on people living close to cell towers. We have 50,000 cell towers in Canada, even though the government of Canada makes billions of dollars from the licensing of frequencies. Safety Code 6 is only for people. Canada has no law, policy, or scientific assessment to protect non-human species. So what about the birds, bees, and the trees? I helped write this document, a discussion document with Meg Sears, who's a scientist and with Prevent Cancer Now. and with Frank Clegg, who is the former president of Microsoft Canada and now the CEO of Canadians for Safe Technology. This is really a very important slide. I know it's very busy. You can look at my paper that I sent to you. So what we have here is biological effects. If you look at the red, biological effects at less than 10 milliwatts per meter squared. We have birds showing DNA damage, insects, pollinators affected, mammals infertility, and plants defective germination. These are at cell tower strengths. And the human limits, which we already know are not sufficient, they start at 2,000. So health limits do not protect wildlife. So what are some of the effects? Birds can get lost. Science indicating at different frequencies, by the way, can affect birds differently.
So, Mark, just a reminder that you said you wanted 5 minutes or a 5-minute notice.
Yes.
We're right around that 5-minute mark. So if you want to try and wrap things up here within the next minute, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, I get a minute. Okay. Well, I go to the insects. So the insects here are really critical. We know that they're fundamental to our food web. They're fundamental for pollination. And the insects are in very sharp decline. This is a comprehensive review. If insect species losses cannot be halted, this will have catastrophic consequences for both the planet's ecosystems and for the survival of mankind. And that as a cofactor is even recognized for Environment Canada and climate change, which is putting $0 into this, by the way. So we're trying to work to change that. So the precautionary principle should be applied. Non-concurrence is warranted based on until truly protective guidelines are established and met. That's and also fiber optics is faster, much faster, more resilient, as said by Dr. Paul Heroux, who's at the Faculty of Medicine, McGill University. This is my last slide. I just also want to address the 9/11 issue. We've been told by two of the big carriers, I've been involved with quite a few cell tower situations across Canada, by two major carriers, that if a cell phone, if it's fully charged, that it will reach any cell tower. It doesn't have to be the cell tower of the provider. And we've also heard that from the RCMP. So the 9/11, people just need to make sure when they go out that they fully charge their cell phones. And we have much work to do. You said, well, what are we going to do here? You know, the horse is out of the barn. Well, we really don't have much choice. We just, for our children and grandchildren, we just have to do our best. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Doesn't look like it, Mark. Thanks very much for your presentation. So we'll invite Leah and Greg. Just reminding again that you have 5 minutes and we'll hold you to that. Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you again for having us. Thanks, Mark, for all that information. My name is Leah McCulloch. I worked in healthcare for 25 years. In fact, we're talking about smoking a lot. One of the last big projects I did with Health Canada and Vancouver Coastal Health was getting smoking out of hospitals and out of your streets. And that took us 7 years, well, more like 20. So I'm happy to talk about how we got the horses back in the barn later if you ask me in question period. I guess the question on every person's heart and mind in this room right now is, okay, so we know the devastating effects. They are real, they are true. I attached 200 examples to my submission that I gave you last week. What can we do to save our community? This is serious stuff. So I would say to you that I went the wrong way. Side, okay.
If you point it down towards the corner here.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Thanks.
This is basically, we are enrolled in the highest risk experiment in the history of the world right now. And so I say, if you're having an experiment, you need a control group. You need the treatment to be given one group, and you need people that don't get the treatment. So I'm asking you today, let's make us the control group. Yes, there's towers around us, but we don't have to have towers in this area in the CVRD. The risk is too high. Let's wait for proof of safety. Clearly, there's no proof of safety. And honestly, it should be on the government and the telecoms to produce that. I'm asking you today to have a vision Be the ones, be the heroes for your communities. Stand up for the people that you're elected to represent and say no. You can be the hero. You don't have to be the one who goes, okay, fine, we'll just let this thing through. What will you say to your grandchildren when their sister is dying of a brain tumor at age 6? You've got to think about these things. You need to represent your community, and you need to represent our community so it thrives. When the pollinators are gone, they're gone. So why don't we keep the pollinators in the CVRD and we can feed the rest of the island? It's worse than smoking. Unlike smoking, you could leave the room or you could put the cigarette out. We are going to be irradiated 24/7, 365. Satellites, yes, but we do have control over the ground. I just want to bring your attention to the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 180. It is an indictable offence to do something that endangers the lives, safety, or health of the public or causes physical injury to any person. It's also an indictable offence to go up to 14 years to administer a noxious thing. And by saying yes to the tower, you will be administering a noxious, dangerous, deathly element to this community. And as I said, unlike smoking, we can't walk away from it. So my question to you today is, what can we do? But also, is this just a tick the box exercise? We know that you're supposed to have public consultations. Is that what we're doing here today? Or are you actually considering what we're saying? And I want to encourage you that you do have a voice. I know people think it's federally regulated. It is. But our conversations with ISED tell us that they will refer back to you. This is ALR land, and it is not okay to put something that's going to destroy the birds, the bees, the bisons, the butterflies, every aspect from bacterial up to mankind and trees. We're going to be affected. So I really encourage you to look at the fact that there are other solutions. We know telecoms have an obligation to serve this area as required by the spectrum license. But we have other options, and one of them is FTTP, which is fiber to the premises. We can do it. There's no radiation. It's more expensive short term, but it saves billions long term because people aren't dying. I'm going to hand it over to Greg so he has time.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've been given the job of, in a minute or two, to try and draw this all together. Now, you've been bombarded with facts, and I'm also, my mind is just frazzled, and I've heard this many times. So really, let's look at this in closing. I'm an environmental engineering consultant. I've been at it for 20, 25 years, and you can hear my South African accent, but that's beside the point. I'm a Valley resident, and I'd like us just to look at one slide, which is the following one. And I think if we'd, here it comes, hopefully. Talk to me. There we go. I'll best done on a scale. And let's have a look at the cell tower. Is this a yes, no case? Do we endorse it or don't we? Let's have a look now just at some of the positives that are coming out of putting up a tower. First off, if I had rapid response here, it'd be nice. There we go. Increased network speed and capacity. And secondly, more towers there are, the more I'm clicking. Excuse me. I would love this too. Pointing down. Right. There we go. Greater coverage, more towers, greater coverage. And also too, we're looking at the 4-5G, 345Gs here, and referring to all three of them. Beyond that, we're looking at yourselves. And really your role here in terms of decision-making, is the horse out there, the barn, is it over the hill? There we go. Your support is really expected from federal government. It's expected from the major industry, the telecommunications industry. Just how much of a role do you play? Or are you just to say, listen, toe the line, we don't expect any uphill from you. So there's the big boot that's come down on your neck, and I might be being presumptuous, but that might be what you're feeling right now. In opposition to that, let's just look at some of the concerns with cell phone towers.
1 minute.
Thank you. Human health issues. Secondly, excuse this is delaying me somewhat. Human reproduction, productivity concerns, which is an impact on the economy. Then animal health has an economic impact. Then there's insect and pollinators, once again affected, and that affects our food supply. Plant and crop health, once again impacting food supply. And then we're looking at the laws, the criminal liability, which has just been mentioned, in addition to which towers on ALR land and the impact upon that land and its productivity. And finally, there's a point up here, which is going to say there are solutions. We talked about fiber to the premises as an option, an alternative to the cell towers and wireless. So let's have a look now at what your role is as a council. What about just telling federal government and
Greg?
yes,
Please wrap it up.
all right.
Thanks.
Okay, it's two more points here. If we can in fact say to federal government and telecom industries, no, we in fact do represent our communities here, and there are a lot of issues that are unresolved from our perspective. And we would like to not be subject to your top-down and decision-making, but in fact support our community and have a non-biased perspective here. So from our perspective, we believe that the cell phone towers are an issue, a concern, and that should be declined until they can prove that in fact it is a healthier option or a faultless and safe option.
Thanks, Greg.
Apologies for this.
Do we have any questions or comments from the directors? Director Robert.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the last three presenters. The only concern I would have with, I don't know any federal colleagues that wear these types of boots. They tend to be in really nice shoes and sitting in Ottawa. So that's
Fair enough.
That's a worker's boot. In regards to, yeah, I was happy with your comments and really kind of putting the pressure on in terms of, you know, when can you make a stand? And there's just so many issues that we can choose to make a stand on. And this is one in that basket for sure, in my opinion. This council and the prior term have been enormous champions of fiber. And in part, the Dove Creek battle kind of led us there to say, hey, you know, the more fiber. And to their credit, the federal government is looking at connecting, I think, over 95% of Canadians to fiber optic by 2035, I think. So I think the question as to whether this technology can be phased out and addressed through this new infrastructure that's arising, I think it's unresolved. I haven't heard one way or another if it can be replaced, but all I know is that this council has been really busy working to connect all of our residents to fiber optics. My only question too is in the insects, yes, there's a complete cataclysm in terms of what's happening to the insect population around the world. But there was a slide by Marge around habitat change. And so when we talk about some of the impacts, you know, there's impacts of agriculture itself. When you look at chemical and pesticides and the loss of habitat, like there's just multiple challenges. And I think what's hard in files like this is to go beyond correlation and establish causation. And I don't think we're quite there yet for some, unless you have more information on that. As my question, if EMF and insect, there's actually causation established, which is really hard to do in any ecosystem studies.
There's a lot of studies. And, you know, if there's one we read just about frogs the other day, just an example where a fellow it was in Paris or somewhere in the Europe, and they put a tower up and it was 4G. And he just did an experiment in his home. And he took some frog's eggs and he put 70 in this bin, 70 in that bin. And one of them he just left on the counter. And one of them he put like a Faraday cage around to prevent the radiation from coming in. And what they found was that in the control one, the Faraday case over them, about 4.3 of the frogs, the tadpoles, died. 4%, sorry, yeah. So out of 70, whatever number that is. And the rest were beautiful and normal, healthy, happy tadpoles. In the bin that was just left open, so presumably open to the same kind of radiation that the butterflies are getting and that we're getting, 90% of the eggs and tadpoles died, 90%. And the ones that survived were all different sizes, like they were small, big, and they were all kind of swimming with a waggle. So they did not develop normally. So there's tons and tons of studies out there like that. And that's why we need to put the brakes on this. And the thing I forgot to mention, which is so vitally important, you think, oh, it's just one more tower. The truth is when 5G comes in, there's going to be thousands of antennas, because of what our presenters presented, is that the microwaves, they don't go through trees, they don't go through buildings. And so you're going to have one of these things every couple of yards or every block at the very least. So every blade of grass, every man, woman, child, orangutan, opossum is going to be irradiated 24/7. And that's a thing to keep in mind. So rather than trying to put it in place and peel it back, you won't be able to peel it back. I really, really encourage you to slow it down, really insist, I'm so grateful you guys are all doing this work. Slow it down. And I appreciated what was said earlier. Cause telecoms to come forward. It's been shown that wireless will never be faster or carry more bandwidth than simple wired. It's faster. It's more. Yeah, well, fiber. I'm sorry, I don't know all the words, but so choose something right now that's a little bit more expensive now, but will save you a lot long term.
Can I just add one point, and don't want to take too long, if that's all right, directing to your question. I think, yes, the concern that I have with 5G or any radiation, in fact, is it's a soup. And it's very difficult if we have things popping out, be it cancer, be it other concerns that pop up, and bees, pollinators, whatever it is, they're all coming out. And how do you get causation back to this common element? It's invisible, you can't smell it, you can't see it, et cetera, et cetera. So how can we actually pin it to that? Unless we have obvious direct change, thanks to it goes up and within a week or a month, bang, it's different. Turn it off and see if things go back to how they were. And that's happened with some cattle in the US. But that's the issue. And I hear what you're saying, but it is difficult, but can be done, I think.
There isn't enough evidence.
Yeah.
Thank you. Director Grieve, you had a question, comment?
Thanks very much. I keep hearing 5G, but that's not what we're talking about here, right? So 5G is the big boogeyman in the room. I'm just wondering, I think we have to take it very seriously because, I agree, it is our sacred duty and obligation to protect and preserve the natural order. But there's so many pressures on the natural order right now. I mean, this is just but another one. We heard about effect on wildlife, but you do know that domestic cats kill over 2.4 billion songbirds a year in North America. And fully 1/2 of all fledglings are taken by cats. I don't see anybody lining up to drown their cats. So it's a relative thing. We got we got an issue around the communication. You talk about that balance. Some of you may know about the judicial inquiry they had in Ontario, Northern Ontario, around the intimate partner deaths of 6 women in over 2 years in northwestern Ontario, and all 6 of them had dropped cell calls. It's not like they can say, "Hey, honey, you want to pass me the phone?" So cellular pay, it does have its advantages. It does have its place. I totally agree. And we're working very hard to get fiber optic connectivity because that is by far and away the best way to go. We know that. I mean, nothing's worse than having to get 5G in your neighborhood so some idiot can watch, streaming talk shows or whatever on their phone. I mean, that's just a waste, right? That makes no sense to me at all. But just to say, if you're going to be adding stuff on both sides there, you really have to weigh it out. And that's our job right now. My question is, this is obviously a federal matter. Which one of the 3 major parties in Canada are taking up the cost?
You bring up a really good point about the 911. And one thing we found when we were out canvassing, I say we, it wasn't me, it was my lovely friends. And what they found was, for example, in the area near Eleanor Road, is that people who had TELUS didn't have as good connectivity as Rogers. So there is I believe there's a concept that these cell towers should be shared. Because if you look at the valley, I don't know if there's any part of the valley that isn't covered by a tower. So, but to your future point, 5G will kill cats as well as humans and frogs and sorry, songbirds. Sorry, I got that wrong. It'll kill the cats. That might help with the birds. But you mentioned 5G versus 4G, and it's a really, really important point. A lot of the data most of the data we have right now is 4G. Like most of the damage that we're talking about with all the, the cats and rats and elephants, it's all 4G. But one thing they noticed was Dr. Malthouse referenced an apartment block where there was a 4G tower on top, and they hadn't had disease yet. Then they put a 5G thing on top of the 4G, and that apartment block became uninhabitable, meaning the people got sick, they got tired, they got headaches, they couldn't work, they had to move out. It was uninhabitable just because they put that little 5G on top of the 4G. So it's really important to note that almost all the data we have, which is conclusively harmful, is 2, 3, and 4G. When you add the 5G component, it's going to be on top of the 2 and 3 and 4G. So the damage that we're already sustaining is going to be magnified. And I can't tell you how much it's going to be magnified. We joked about, putting a mouse in a microwave and bringing it here on a platter for you roasted, but we know we'd get in trouble with the animal rights people, right? You can't do that. You can't put a rat in the microwave and cook it and make a point with it. But the point is that's what we are doing. And your point about the satellite, really important. So let's not make it worse. Your point about the cats, very important. Let's not make it worse. Once the pollinators are gone, they're gone. And so is our food supply. And I appreciate the intense pressure on you guys. I do. I know it's coming top down. And I know TELUS just has to jump through the hoops and tick the boxes and they're game free. But I'm asking you guys to be heroes, to make a stand, to be brave. It's hard to be brave right now. There's so much coming at us, but that's my plea to you today.
Thank you once again. To get back to the question, which one of the 3, even 4 major political parties in Canada are taking up your cause?
Are you asking because you don't think it's a worthy cause, or are you testing my political knowledge? Because I don't know the answer to that. But it's a really important question. And if they're not, why aren't they? It comes down, same thing, sorry, smoking, I did this for 7 years. Government has an interest in these cell towers because they get paid a lot of money for the bandwidth. That's my understanding. So and same with smoking. They made a lot of money on cigarette sales on the tax, right? So it was up to us to say, well, the money that you're making on the tax on the cigarettes doesn't even begin to cover the money it's costing the hospitals and the long-term care facilities and all the cost of what we found out in the end was that there's still about 37,000 people a year dying from cigarette smoke. And we've worked on this really hard, which is about 1.5 jumbo jets a week crashing. That's the numbers. And it's going to be far worse with 5G because we cannot turn it off.
If I can just add a point, sorry. I think that, and this is from my perspective, irrespective of party, we're talking about a couple of elements here, and the one is greed and the other is control. It's all about money. That's the bottom line, and I think that's really been presented here. So who is not going to say that, listen, that's a certain amount of income coming to our party, and how can we actually say no to that? So it's a very tough call, I think, for political parties, as either a standpoint on a ethical and a moral point of view, or they're going to say, listen, we need that into our coffers. So I'm uncertain as to who's going to take that stand.
Can I just add a comment here about the political parties?
Yes, please. Well,
yes. So I have been involved in this for well over 10 years. And what we have found is that in each of the political parties, bar none, we have people, members of parliament, who understand the seriousness of the situation. And I can say positive things about each of them. So what we have to do is we have to increase the awareness for the other members of parliament. They're very busy people, I know that. And so this is a role that you can play. I mean, I hope you will vote for a letter of non-concurrence. The final say is with I said. But here is an opportunity to ask for those studies. We don't have any studies on human health around cell towers, and none on organisms either. These studies should be done before anything is rolled out. We have the evidence that these have serious implications, could have very serious implications for healthy ecosystems, for health of people. We have that. There's enough there that should justify having studies done, which would provide some of the answers to the questions that we're asking. So that is something positive that your directors can do on that score. But as far as political parties are concerned, we have advocates or people who understand in each political party. I'll give you an example. Yvonne Baker in Etobicoke had a cell tower moved away from one that was, I think it was already up. It wasn't operationalized, but it was up away from a school. Terrence Young, who is a former member of parliament, was instrumental in bringing about the parliamentary health hearings that were held in 2015. We need to have those again. There were 12 excellent recommendations made by the committee. It was supported by all of the parties. The Bloc did not have a representative, nor did the Greens, but of the three main political parties, Health Canada looked at it, and how the scientists somehow were able to write this up and pull the wool over the eye of the Minister of Health. Those recommendations, you can see 4 of them were on electromagnetic sensitivity. So we have political parties. The Green Party just passed 2 proposals that are now policy, they're ratified, that have to do with fiber and with Safety Code 6. And I wish I could, the NDP for the 2015, they wrote a minority report that said, yes, we need to be particularly concerned about children. So we have, they're there. They just need to know more. They're busy people, and you can help make that awareness happen and increase that awareness.
Well, I would suggest that they may be busy people, but we have a room full of very passionate and informed people here right now. And that I think you have to take the cause to the feds, especially the feds. This is where the real power lies. The very fact that we don't have empirical data on any of this stuff is obviously ridiculous. But I think there is an election coming up, because if I read the tea leaves correctly, probably there's going to be an opportunity to maybe convince one of the major parties to champion this at the top level. Thank you.
Any more questions from the directors? So vote on receipt of the presentation that was just provided to us from Leanne Gray. Mark? Carried, thank you. So next agenda item is carried, thank you.
If there's any questions of the directors, the staff are here to answer them. Otherwise, it'd just be on receipt.
Shorter.
Director Arbor? So vote on receipt of the management report. Carried, thank you. Moving into item D, reports.
Proceed.
Thank you, carried.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and I'll refer this matter to Dylan Thiessen, planner, who will present the staff report and is available to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Russell, and good morning, directors. Through the chair to the directors, just before I quickly start, I want to address the quick note below the agenda item for full transparency. The staff report originally referenced 3 options when only 2 are presented, so this was amended this morning to be clarified. Moving on from that, Innovation, Science and Economic Canada, if you've heard, ICID Canada is a department of the federal government and the regulatory agency and approval authority for telecommunications towers. They require that a telecommunications service provider receive a letter of concurrence from a local government when a new tower is being proposed. A letter of concurrence advises the federal government that the proponent has adhered to any local consultation requirements and addressed any relevant policies that exist at the local level, but it does not strictly regulate the siting of the tower, which does remain within the authority of ICID Canada. Staff have received a request for a letter of concurrence from TELUS and SitePath Consulting for the property at 1388 Eleanor Road. This proposal was introduced to the directors at the August 8, 2022 Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. Since that meeting, SitePath Consulting have presented their proposal to the Area E Advisory Planning Commission and the Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission, and have hosted a public information meeting in keeping with CVRD Board Policy P89. Both APCs supported the proposal moving forward, and the public information meeting received several favorable comments, though comments in opposition have certainly increased leading up to this meeting. Staff are recommending that a letter of concurrence be granted, given that the necessary public consultation has been completed and that the policies within the board policy P89 have been addressed. However, staff do note the concerns raised by some members of the public about potential negative impacts on public health and the use of ALC land for the tower. Of course, this is referenced many times this morning. We all know that Health Canada does have safety requirements in place, which do have to be followed. And it's important to remember that the ALC and its policies as a provincial entity do not apply to something within the federal government's jurisdiction. All of this said, if a letter of concurrence is granted or not, all public correspondence will be forwarded to ICID Canada. Staff will also include language within the letter that highlights these concerns, in addition to encouraging that the use of a qualified environmental professional, receipt of a Comox First Nation Cultural Heritage Investigation Permit, and the further exploration of the northeastern corner of the lot, something referenced in the staff report, as that siting location would increase the buffer from Foden Park. I will end by noting that I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and that Brian Gregg with SitePath Consulting is joining us on Zoom.
Director Harbour.
Thanks, Chair. And I will note as usual, as it is in area B, I look forward to the comments if you have any in regards to the consultation process. And it's interesting because, you know, we did pass, this is the first test, I think, of our antenna policy that we passed in 2021, I think, or 2022. My memory fades, but following the Dove Creek. And so what I'm hearing in a way is that from staff is that the applicant did go through all the steps identifying requirements, identifying that policy, and provided opportunity for public consultation. And according to what we wrote up, it sounds like we're hearing a lot today about agriculture, but our agricultural APC is in favor of the siting, and so is the Area B APC. So in regards to our process, it looks like I can't disagree with staff that with our limited bandwidth, sorry to use that word here, but in this context, but that a limited role in regards to this issue, that we try to lay a better path for future, and so they have met their requirements. So, and because a lot of our letter of concurrence is based on them meeting our requirements of local government, then, you know, it's how do you ground another course of action? There was many things that were raised that I think are great advocacy positions to pick up. And I mean, I saw option 2, which was just to forward the comments. It's kind of, you know, the boot from earlier. No, it's not really. I don't feel it as a boot, but I know what's being meant is that I think when the comment was, you know, there's probably an expectation that local government on the broader arena falls into line in regards to telecommunication policy in Canada. That's probably true. So I don't know. I want to hear a little more from my colleagues. I know in Dove Creek we brought back SitePath. SitePath is here today, and I don't know if, like, there's a lot of questions that were raised. For example, what is the role? We spent a lot of time on Dove Creek talking about the role that the antenna was performing in their network. I see this one is kind of close to the ferry and the airport. And we are not, our antenna policy doesn't say that we should weigh into these things because you really get into but if SitePath wants to come back and have further discussions and questions with the committee, that's something I'd welcome. Or otherwise, I guess I'm amenable to option 2 as well, which is just to say, you know, forward the comments. But I do want to hear more from my colleagues, and I want to appreciate the work that's been put on both by the applicant and the public actually in picking up this issue.
Director Greaves.
Thank you. Well, you do know that the site is located right next to a major NATO base on the Pacific Northwest, largest military base in Western Canada. And when you talk about EMT, they're dealing with technologies, intensities and frequencies that are only dreamed of in our philosophies. I'm not sure what is the output of a cell tower is in watts, because I do know that some of the apparatus on the base are pumping out 2.8 megawatts of power. And that's just a kilometer away from, or so, from where this is being sited. So I would just suggest that maybe it's kind of an ant and an elephant scenario anyway. We've got, I talked about the horses leaving the barn, especially in light of all these clusters of low orbit satellites. And I will admit that this in 50 years, 50 years, this may look as primitive as smoke signals out there, I'm waiting for the new technologies to come online, the world-beating technologies that replace all this. And I'm hoping one day that I will be able to message Director Arbor with some kind of a quantum communication device where he gets a message a second before I send it. That's a science joke. So, I spoke about the fact we have no national sovereignty anymore, that you talk about cell phones, there's 6.71 billion cell phones in the world today. Out of that, 66 of the population own one. There's 1.5 million antenna array out there. So, it's nice we're having this discussion. But, I hate to blow it, but in the bigger picture, it's kind of irrelevant. And being that we have support, as Director Arbor said, from both our advisory panel and our agricultural advisory panel, and on this particular site, I think I will support it. Thank you.
I understand Brian Gregg's on the line. Brian, did you want to provide any comments in regards to the application?
Thanks for having us here today. Yeah, so I'd be happy to respond as well just to any of the comments or questions that some of the delegations had. I took detailed notes, but I know we spent a lot of time on that, so I won't go into that, and we'll just make some general comments here. I think my first thought is that while it was good to hear from those 5 delegations, they, how would I put it, represented a certain perspective. In our view, it's unfortunate that none of the supporters that were out there in the local community had an opportunity to appear as a delegation at this meeting as well. Certainly, actually through our official consultation process.
Brian, if I could, and I normally don't like to interrupt, but again, I think any member of the public had the ability to submit a form and come in as a delegation today. So I'm not quite sure if your comment there was completely accurate.
Yeah, so
thanks.
All that I meant by that, allow me to clarify, and thank you for that, is that through our official consultation process that we're required to complete in alignment with both the CVRD and ISED protocols, it did show that there's roughly, of the 37 commenters, 20 were supportive. So that's 55% support. Whereas today we've only heard from 5 delegations who had concerns or non-support. So I just wanted to point that out. That's what we heard. The other thing that I think is really important to touch on here is that with one exception, I think all of those people that appeared as a delegation were not from the local area. Or they didn't provide a civic address during our consultation process. And you could certainly verify that on your end, but obviously everyone's welcome to comment on any application regardless of where they're from. But I do think that for any decision maker, it's also important to understand, what the local constituents want or desire, and that's what we've sort of tried to focus on. I guess the other thing I would say here is that the vast majority of those comments that came before you today really kind of questioned the validity of Health Canada's Safety Code 6. And actually that's completely outside the scope of our authority through this process, as you've all touched on already, but I just wanted to sort of reiterate that in a very respectful way. Another overarching theme that I heard from I think most or all of those commenters was that there seems to be a perception that somehow a fiber optic connection or a landline based system could somehow replace a need for wireless connectivity. But actually, that's I would say a bit of a misunderstanding. Most people do rely on mobile service for emergency service response needs, as was alluded to as well. And obviously, having a fiber connection to your home or business, while a fantastic technology that many will also desire, it certainly will be of little or no utility if someone's out on the road or needs to call for help and they're not, conveniently right next to their landline or phone at home. I also think we should, if possible, just kind of briefly get into the specifics of the proposal. There's been very little discussion as of this point as to specifically what TELUS is proposing and sort of the rationale for it. And perhaps we could just kind of briefly touch on that. So at a high level, first things first, the whole reason for this proposal is because there is not reliable service in the Little River Qualicum area. That's quite easy to demonstrate on the network. There's a lot of dropped and blocked calls as well as customer complaints. So there is indeed a problem, and Doug, who's here with me from TELUS, he knows from a local perspective just how poor that service is, and might wish to top up on my comments in a moment. The other thing we wanted to touch on is that we have tried in earnest to, as we always do, to select a large lot for this proposal that is set back as much as possible from the adjacent uses and residences. So this proposal does achieve that. It's an approximately 80-acre property, and it is respectfully set back, I think, several hundred meters from the closest adjacent housing. It's also a small 40-meter monopole. This is actually the slimmest, smallest type of tower that we propose on the network. And actually, one of the reasons we can only build it this tall is because we're right next to the Department of National Defense airstrip. And so while TELUS would have desired a taller tower to better cover the area, due to that proximity to those runways, we had to limit the height to 40 meters plus a 3-meter tall lightning rod. That was the most we could do to get it approved by those authorities. So I guess the positive trade-off is, in other words, that as a result, we have a relatively compact, as well as aesthetically integrated structure that we think will be in keeping with the aesthetic in the area to the extent possible. And then I just sort of a final comment is, again, we had more support from the local community members than opposition during the comment period. There does seem to be a lot of public interest in this from people who are not from the local area. And I think the presentations that you heard from today before I spoke once again kind of represent that. This proposal does appear to have fallen on the radar of Canadians for Safe Technology and this new Vancouver Island Safe Technology Alliance group. And so as a result, you have now heard from people who may not be from the local area. So that's all I had to say. I'd be more than happy to drill down into specific comments and questions that those other presenters had. I did take notes. I'd be happy to respond to any and all questions, comments. And perhaps if I could hand it off to Doug just for a different perspective as well. He's a TELUS employee. He might be able to top up.
We do have a question or comment here from Director Arbor first before we go to Doug. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. And maybe that will Doug might be able to answer my questions as well, because I think it'll link to the TELUS plans. And Brian, thank you so much for that additional information, because you're right, it's good to understand the context for the property, deciding what you have in mind. And again, I think on the consultation side, I think we saw a very smooth process. I think the policy, thank you for kind of being the guinea pig on this one. I figure it's been a little bit smoother, but I do have a question around a little bit the options, like, and just before, because when things bug me, I always state them. So On the local area comment, Brian, like it doesn't fall on deaf ear because that's always important in all of our zoning issues. We always look at the local situation, but in the events where we saw dozens and dozens of people show up from our other places in our area on those hot button issues. I mean, if you look at the clear-cut protests in the 90s, it was a lot of local people were in favor of the current practices, but it was broader society that was raising questions. So you always have to pay attention to the level of public concern. And in this issue, I don't think that level of public concern is diminishing until we get better clarity. So with that comment being made, I'm just wondering if from TELUS or yourself, Brian, if I think for fiber, what people like is you have the option at your property to amplify it with Wi-Fi and EMF or not, and some people will choose. But there's that. So I think we all agree on that. But I guess the bigger concern when we hear about people like, are we going to see, is this the opening of 5G generation in the Comox Valley and the rest of that? Like, what is this tower, like, if you're looking to service the ferry and passing traffic, would 3G or 2G technology address that need, right? So why do we need to build potentially, and I don't know if it's 4G or 5G, it's been a bit lost on me, and all the level of communication has become high, but if you can address that, are we trying to look at a peak capacity for some reasons, and then you can talk about those reasons, or could a lower level emissions and prior generations have filled that need? Because it's not a large area, it's not a large urban area. We're really looking just mostly at ferry traffic and a little bit around the neighborhoods there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I could certainly address that, but I think maybe I should allow Doug to speak from an internal TELUS perspective. I think he'll have a broader understanding of TELUS's plans and vision for the area going forward, whereas I tend to work on site-specific proposals. So perhaps I could hand it to Doug for that one.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. And through the chair, thank you, Director, for your questions. Just a quick introduction. So my name is Doug, and I work for TELUS. I'm a TELUS employee. I live in the Comox Valley. So I have my role at TELUS is basically to work on a team that builds out the wireless network. So I have a fairly unique perspective, I would say, at both the needs in the local community for this service, both in this area and also others, and then also just how wireless networks are deployed. So happy to answer any other questions you may have. On the specific question of technologies, and I know we heard a lot of information today. Quite a bit of it was not really relevant to the specific proposal when we're talking about 5G. So 5G right now, 5G is here in the Valley. And by the way, we have a very large tower. I'm sure everyone's seen it. It's up by the hospital, a very large guide tower with a lot of equipment on it. And that is providing 5G service. There's other towers as well around town. So it's not that it's not here. It's not that it's not an environment that does not have 5G. But just more specifically to your question as to the need. So, when we're looking at developing and deploying a wireless network, we want to provide, really the best service that we can. Also, technologies that are in the past become decommissioned, right? So there's a natural rollover to the point where 5G will be, at some point the new 3G service, and 3G will be decommissioned. So there's this natural technological rollover that always happens, and it doesn't happen on a site-by-site basis. It happens across the entire network, and then through that, we're able to provide the newest and the greatest technology and service available out there. In this kind of a case, 5G looks an awful lot like 4G. In fact, it's essentially the same frequencies and very similar power output and the rest of it. So to the point where there is essentially no difference when we're talking about health and safety and some of these other questions that people have. We're not talking about millimeter waves here, as some of the slides before had shown. That's an urban setting. This tower will not necessitate or usher in the need for those smaller installations. So by the same token as well, though, we're talking about new cell service in an area that you can't make a phone call. So while we're talking about 5G technology and other technologies in the future, there's that basic need in this area to provide cell service cell coverage that we're, that's really the fundamental objective that we're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Doug. So I've been very reserved in regards to my comments and thoughts and opinions, and have tried to remain very neutral throughout this whole entire process. I just came on board middle of October, sworn in middle of November, and there's been a number of folks within the Comox Valley that have provided me with a lot of information for me to look at and review. And I have looked at several of those documents. So I get and understand exactly where some of our friends from the Comox Valley have put forward their concerns with regards to public health and safety. I guess, I do have a concern with regards to, and I don't like to use the word rhetoric, but in regards to TELUS saying that out of the interest of public health and safety, it's an imperative or there's a strong need to have 5G technology in place. But again, if we're looking at the other side of things with regards to public health and safety, and I think Dr. Stephen put forward a pretty reasonable presentation with regards to concerns about public health and safety, whether or not that's a fair argument with regards to why we need to put up a tower. It's very difficult today because, again, the CVRD is limited in regards to what it can vote upon today. And then, of course, we're at the whim of the federal government with regards to ISED and Health Canada in regards to them making a decision whether or not there are health and safety concerns with regards to this particular type of technology in our neck of the woods. Based upon the recommendations from the staff, it's been suggested that, again, a letter of concurrence be put forward, but also for the CVRD to submit to ISED its concerns with regards to public health and safety, with regards to Comox First Nation being engaged regarding the need for a cultural heritage investigation permit, a qualified environmental professional to be involved to mitigate environmental impacts, and that TELUS further explore siting the tower to the northeastern corner of the property for comments from the Advisory Planning Commission and Parks Department. With regards to providing a letter of concurrence requesting these items, my opinion, I think it would be fair, or I shouldn't say fair. My opinion is that a letter of concurrence shouldn't be going forward until these items have been addressed. And that would be my thought and comment. There's one other thing here that I am, and again, it might be frowned upon, but I'm going to speak my mind and speak my heart, is in regards to engagement with the Comox First Nation. And there's something that really needs to be considered in regards to that comment that I've just made. There's a commitment from the federal, provincial, and municipal governments in regards to the United Nations Declaration on Rights for Indigenous Peoples. And it's very important for TELUS, for Canada, for BC and local governments to understand the interconnectedness of Indigenous peoples with breathing and non-breathing organisms. And these organisms don't just stay within that tower. And if those organisms end up being impacted, that impacts the rights of the Indigenous peoples in and around this area. So I think that needs to be clearly thought about with regards to whether or not TELUS has done its due diligence in regards to engagement with folks in Area B. Because the Comox First Nation does exist in Area A, B, C, the city of Courtenay, the town of Comox, and further up on it. So I would like to see more engagement with TELUS and with ISED and other federal agencies with the Comox First Nation in regards to this issue with regards to the tower. I'm also of the opinion that ISED should be coming and meeting with the Comox Valley Regional District to talk about these issues. And I know our concerns revolve around whether or not engagement has occurred with TELUS and the CVRD with regards to the location of these towers. But I think the federal government has an obligation to come and talk with the local government about these towers being located where they are and addressing the concerns of folks here in the Comox Valley. So those are my thoughts and opinions right now. So I guess what I would really like to put forward to the directors is a resolution that, again, a letter of concurrence at this time not be supported until we've had confirmation of engagement with TELUS and the Comox First Nation. And with regards to engagement from ISED to the Comox Valley Regional District. And I'd ask that the folks here please hold back on your applause and your gestures. And just finally, in regards to Brian's comments in regards to some of the folks here in the room are out of towners, I would remind you, Brian, that you're an out of towner as well. And the big corporation that TELUS is not here in the Comox Valley. I'm not sure, based on the video, there's probably close to 70 people in this room right now. And to me, I recognize a lot of the faces here. So I would say that they are local. So those are my comments. I put forward a resolution for the directors to consider.
On receipt.
Thank you. We'll vote on receipt. All carried. Thank you. Can move the recommendation now? Carried.
And Mr. Chair, just to confirm that we've got it right, you're asking that we reach out to ISED to ask them to come and speak with the electoral area directors, and that you be provided confirmation that the applicant has engaged with Comox First Nation. We would likely seek that confirmation from First Nations or Comox First Nation themselves.
I'd also be curious as whether or not ISED has the duty to consult with the Comox First Nation as well.
Good. And we can
Thanks.
ask them that as well.
Yeah.
Just so we've got it, Lisa. Yep. Thanks.
Director Greaves.
Would that not be a separate motion then? I mean, the consultation with Comox is part of the main motion, but I'm thinking with the federal government one, it may be quite a long time before, much like our requests for the province on consultation. But so maybe we should make it and finally that, or make it a separate motion totally. I turn to the CAO for guidance on that, because otherwise it kind of muddles the whole thing.
It does stall any consideration of this. We will not be providing a letter of concurrence if you adopt this resolution, and the information that was presented today will not be passed on to ISED. You have not directed that. You're saying that you want to hold off on any further consideration until you hear from ISED, and that you receive confirmation from Comox First Nation that they have been consulted. And your direction is that you confirm from ISED what their responsibilities are with respect to engagement with First Nations. That's really what you have in front of you. If you disagree with that, then vote down or amend the resolution is the action you have to take.
Director Harper.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And on the resolution, yeah, I think it's good. And it's not that we're not providing a letter of non-concurrence today. We're basically seeking more information, and I think that's right on a hot topic. And I don't want to, again, in regards to our staff recommendation, I think they were valid in regards to the expectation of our policy, of our antenna policy. And so to Brian and Doug, I think I also want to acknowledge the work that goes into this. And I think some of the things that are coming up, I think they're right to point out that they're a little bit bigger, and that we're asking about, they're a little bit bigger than the application per se. But I think you're correct, Chair, that we have to go into those arenas if there's going to be comfort in the communities in the future that we're heading in the right direction. So it'll be great to have a conversation with ISID and make sure that Comox First Nation is also well briefed. And we may find that that's, I don't know if you want to pass it back to the consultants. I don't know what level of engagement there'll be with KFN. Maybe there has been some, so that's something that I wasn't so sure about. That was the only part of the recommendation, but not enough for me to make a fuss about it. I'm quite willing to vote and proceed on this today.
Director Grace, you have any more comments?
No, Chair. I think that, you know, we've registered what we can. We got a very narrow mandate here. And, you know, we can say that they definitely fulfilled the obligations according to the specifications of those obligations. But, you know, I think by adding in our First Nation piece, and we have to do that in everything we do, and it's extremely important. Plus the fact that it is Comox First Nations that are keepers of the land. And we're living on the territory, so I do think that yeah, that they've got certain concerns, I'm sure, that need to be recognized. Whether or not it's just a cursory consultation or something more substantive, I do not know. Maybe Brian could answer the question whether or not Site Path did go and talk to KFN.
Thanks. Before I open it up to Brian again, I am wondering, based upon the maps that I've seen, whether that tower is in amongst fish-bearing streams or not. And I'm sure Brian will be able to answer that question when we bring him on. I also understand that apparently Brian does live in the Comox Valley, but his mailing address from all of his letters and his correspondence to all the different folks that have reached out to him was a Vancouver-based address. So I apologize, Brian, if I maybe put you in a different spot than, I guess you have a mailing address and you have a living address. So those are two things we need to take into consideration. Thanks. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and again, certainly welcome Doug to top up from a TELUS internal perspective. I'm a consultant for TELUS, but yeah, I am aware of the, I think it's a recent addition actually, of the cultural heritage investigation permit requirement, and going forward on any new or additional applications that's something that planning staff have flagged for us to do. So that would be the case proactively, I think, on any, if there's an additional proposal into the future. As for this one, I just say it very respectfully, it was never something that was specifically requested of us. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have, directly engaged the Comox Nation. And I know that that's something that TELUS is more than happy to do. We have all kinds of projects in partnership and in collaboration with different First Nation communities. So it's the right thing to do, more than happy to do that. But I just wanted to address that head on, that cultural heritage investigation permit piece. Since this application's been going on for some time, well over a year, I don't think that was formalized within the Comox Valley Regional District as something we had to do for cell tower proposals when we set out on this application. And I heard about that just recently for another separate proposal. So that's sort of how that has played out. I should, though, sort of very respectfully say to Chair Hardy, I did try to call and email you about this proposal as well. Totally understand. Sometimes it's best to wait for this to go through staff and through to the board, but perhaps we could also discuss how that engagement can look from your perspective, if you're interested to do that. And then I guess my final comment is in relation to hiring a qualified environmental professional. Certainly that's something we can look to do. It's our understanding that we're generally looking to use existing access that already traverses an existing water course on the property that has been in place for some time. And it's been our objective to to comply with all regulatory requirements, including setbacks from any water course or other sensitive areas. And I think we achieve that here. But as per the recommendations through your planning staff and the staff report today, we would be more than happy to look to engage a qualified environmental professional to see that through properly. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up, Brian, if I can, in regards to reaching out again to me. Again, you had staff to go through with regards to reach out to the chair for the Electoral Area Services Committee. So I just left it at that. In regards to me being a representative of the Comox First Nation, again, that engagement and consultation process with the Comox First Nation takes place with the Comox First Nation. And I'm not a chief or counselor of the Comox First Nation. So I'm not so sure that comment that you put forward was really relevant or not. In regards to another comment that you made with regards to the application was put in, quite a while back, over a year ago plus. The regional growth strategy, if I recall correctly, has been recently amended. So, and I think if you've known anything about how the Comox Valley Regional District conducts themselves, one of their key priorities is in regards to their relationship with the Comox First Nation. And the word consultation is not taken loosely, and neither is the word engagement taken loosely. So I'm sure with your conversations with the CVRD staff over the last year plus, I'm sure you would have known about that important relationship and how that consultation is required. And I would think that if TELUS doesn't want to do that consultation with the Comox First Nation, being that they're a third party, again, the government of Canada and the government of British Columbia have those obligations, and so does the CVRD. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks. Oh, I got a comment from Director Arbor, and then we should probably try and wrap things up because we're going to finish at 11:30.
Yeah.
Director Arbor.
Thanks, Chair. And I mean, the only thing in the antenna policy that we crafted a year ago in regards to Comox First Nation is under 6, whenever a development is proposed to occur within 200 meters of a water course, the regional district requires a proponent to contact Comox First Nation to inquire about the need to obtain a cultural heritage investigation permit. So to be honest, maybe internally, if you're interested, Chair, we could look at our policy. So in the future, it's clear we could change the language around that if we want fuller engagement with KFN. So I think there's an internal piece in fairness to the applicants that we could look at here as well. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. Any other comments? We're good. Vote on the resolution that has been put forward. Carried.
Move a short break.
Mr. Chair, what I would suggest is that you take a break now and commence the meeting again at 12:30. But before doing that, adopt the resolution for an in-camera, because there is an in-camera matter to be considered in the meantime as well.
Second.
Carried.
And the resolution is on the agenda. It's for the reasons of 91A, the acquisition disposition of property, or 91I, the receipt of advice from solicitor client privilege.
Director Green.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to CEO, are we going to vary the agenda then to bring forward the in-camera earlier, or are we going to try to plow through a little more of the housekeeping stuff?
No, you've done that by adopting this resolution to recess and to move in camera. And so the rest of the agenda will be considered at 12:30. There is 2 items that were not yet considered, and that is the Devon Cross Island Trail and the Lazo Greenway. Those can be considered subsequently when you come back to the regular meeting.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, folks. Sorry, folks, for those of you that are online, we'll be starting up in about 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so then to put items D2 and D3 to the end of the agenda.
Okay. So we're going to amend part of the agenda D, is it 2D? D2 and D3 to the end of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All carried. Thank you. All in favor, vote. Thanks. Carried. All right. So next agenda item is Electoral Area C, the provincial referral for water license and amendment on groundwater extraction.
Second report.
All in favor, carried.
Thank you, Chair and Directors, and Jody McLean is here to present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Jody.
Hello, through the CEO to the chair and directors. In January, this committee received a staff report regarding referral from the province on groundwater extraction. The application was seeking to amend a license to change the purpose from freshwater bottling to water sales and water delivery. Staff is recommending the board consider the stated purpose as being able to qualify for under the home occupation provisions. This is, of course, subject to the home occupation conditions listed in section 305 of the zoning bylaw. At the time, this committee requested some additional information before proceeding. Staff has been regarding that additional information, staff has been in contact with the file manager at the Ministry of Forests, and they were not able to attend today, but did confirm that the Comox First Nations was included in the referral program, but they cannot share the response that was received. Mr. Chair, staff is recommending the same resolution as the January report. With that, staff can work with the applicant to ensure the development and use is kept under those home occupation regulations. Oh, and also online on Zoom, the applicant, Christopher McKenzie, is available for if you have any questions or comments there.
Any comments, questions? Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I guess part of the motion regarding the Ministry of Forests, I'm disappointed they're not here. It says they could be here in the spring. It's that larger context that a lot of people are referring to would be good to have more information for this committee, because I think it'd be good to have an understanding of where they're heading with all this at the province and the kind of policies that they're proposing and the level of engagement with local government, which I think has not been really there in regards to water. That's fine, it's their jurisdiction, but I still think they should come so that we can better understand where we're heading in a world where everything that's happening in California and Oregon is coming our way, and so initiating some discussions with them. And to be honest, while we're at it, we could probably add a few more topics that we could discuss with the Ministry of Forest Land. So quite disappointed that a large reason for that deferral was based on having that feedback and discussion with the Ministry of Forest. So I still feel there's still a big part of me that feels like I'll be making a bit of a, making up my mind in a vacuum when there could be such better information at our disposal. Otherwise, I see staff, still have, I think I still disagree somewhat with staff's interpretation around home occupation. So this report, I don't think is bringing a lot of new information forward. So I'll just pass it on to the other directors. Thanks.
So I don't know if that's under new business, or are you putting forward a resolution now in regards to more engagement with the Lands and Water BC with regards to? Okay, so we'll leave that one alone then. Okay, so I don't have any comments or questions in regards to the water license and in regards to home occupation use.
Might want to ask him for any comments.
Ms. McKenzie, did you want to make a comment in regard to your application?
He's on mute.
I think we got you on mute right now. Might be on purpose, it might be accidental. Just horsing around. Are you able? There you go. It looks like you're on there.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak once again to the Electoral Area Services Committee. Can you hear me fine?
Yep, hear you loud and clear. Thanks.
I just want to speak to Mr. Arbor's stance on the home occupation. He's well aware that it's limited to 125 square meters footprint. So the idea that our sole proprietor business, family run occupation would become something other than that, it really shouldn't be tabled. The regional district was present at a very thorough and well-attended expose from the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development, and the Ministry of Agriculture were also present, as was Director Grieve. All of the information about the aquifer has been presented. 80% of the aquifer's hydrostatic pressure flows into the sea annually. 20% is being utilized. I think it's unfair to keep rehashing old business. We want our permit issued. I would like to remind Mr. Grieve that it's been 5 years to the day that he proclaimed he would save us a lot of time and money and deny us. To a round of applause from the audience. Well, I think he ticked all the wrong boxes this time. The only thing it's cost time and money is the regional district and his electoral taxpayers. All for nothing, really. This is nothing what these people portray it to be. And we feel we've been treated unfairly throughout this entire process. 5 years is long enough. And if you go to page Appendix B, please, on the screen, page 1. Right there. Appendix B, page 1, 2 columns. Put it on the screen, please.
I believe it's on.
No, that's not it. Right there. Thank you. Bottom statement, column on the left. Read that out loud, please, Mr. True.
Yeah, we're not going to read out that.
No, I'm sure everybody can read it though.
Yeah.
And I'll remind everyone that on the Electoral Area Services Committee of March 5th, 2018, it stated specifically that for this license, the province has requested the rezoning. And that statement there from the ministry is contrary to what we've had to go through to have our hopes and dreams fulfilled. And it's been a very unnecessary process, unfair.
So
Now, if you go
again,
down-
Mr. McKenzie,
go down
Mr.
to the
McKenzie,
precedent of
if I
rights.
could, Mr. McKenzie, is again, I think you made reference to a comment with regards to let's don't look backwards, let's look forward, let's move
Oh,
forward.
yes, we're looking forward, all right.
Would I suggest as we just get on with business instead of hashing out what's
Yes, of
took
course,
place back in 2018?
of course. Now scroll down to the precedent of rights. One more page.
We're going to give you about one more minute and then we're going to move on to
Yeah,
business
I
here.
expect that. No, you went right past it. A little more, there you go. Now, if you look at where industrial water usage is, it's number 6 in the precedents of rights. And the statement by planners that we've become something greater in the future is quite evident because now it's water works. It's number 2 in the precedent of rights. The planners, I've asked them to change in the staff report to remove that we would have local tank trucks attend our property. And I said that we would need a tank truck to fulfill our sales goal of having people buy vessels from 100 liters to 500 liters to have in their homes or garages. And we'd use this small tanker to fill those containers. I don't need misrepresentations that make us look bad. I think to prolong and ask for the ministry to come once again, you're just kicking the can down the road. Our rights need to be upheld, and we've waited long enough, and we've given you all the information you need. The ministry has given you all the information you need, and we've hired the most prestigious hydrogeologist and presented to you all of the facts regarding the aquifer and its potential volumes and what my neighbors may see as a result of any extractions. And we anticipate using less than 2,000 liters of water per day. And had we had a bottling business, it probably would have been around the 1,500 liter mark. And the fact that you guys keep saying we're going to be sold to Nestle, and this is the rhetoric that follows us like a dark cloud. And we're getting tired of it. We just want to move on. We want our permit issued so we can get started. We're going to have a small little building, maybe 600 square feet in the front of our property. And we're going to have a vending machine, a water vending machine, and the U-fill as stated in our original application. It's never been about single-use bottling or factories or selling to conglomerates. I'd just like to move on, please.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Director Grieve, you had a comment?
No, I think the comment should be that we are moving on, and this is a new application and a new classification. So I would urge that we vote on receipt and go right to the recommendation.
So vote on receipt. Sorry, motion on receipt. Thank you. Carrie?
No, I would like to move the recommendation.
Danielle Bird? Thank you, all carried.
Calling a vote?
Yep. Vote on recommendation?
In favor.
Sorry. Director Hubbard, did you have any comments?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm really torn about voting in favor. But I've, I think staff have been reasonably helpful in helping me understand the home occupation. I still have my personal disagreement with it. Is it
Get out the
enough?
bylaws, start reading it.
No further comment. Thank you there, Mr. McKenzie. We have Director Arbor
Yeah.
speaking. Thank you.
The attitude of the applicant has been quite challenging in this whole process, and I don't think has been necessarily helpful to the process.
I don't think we need to make things personal.
No, thank you.
Either side. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just focus on comments and questions and concerns.
So
with
as I
regards
was
to
saying
recommendations.
before being interrupted, yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't think yeah, because the home occupation doesn't sit well with me in our interpretation, and it is an interpretation left to elected officials. I will struggle to vote in favor for this. I'm happy to hear more from the chair or my colleague.
Thanks. Based again on the interpretation of what home business occupation is, based upon the language that's in the regional growth strategy right now, I don't think we have any we have no reason not to go forward with the recommendation, my opinion. There are some mistakes maybe made in regards to the use of the language that allows for this activity to take place, and we have no other real alternative, in my opinion, than to proceed with the recommendation. It doesn't mean moving forward with regards to the review of the regional growth strategy moving forward that we review the language and maybe get a little stronger definition of what revolves around a home business occupation at the end of the day. So any other comments, questions? So we're voting on a recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move receipt. Are we going to go back?
No, you're on to
Move receipt.
item number 2. Yeah.
Number two.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I might suggest that we were anticipating for item number 2 that the applicant would be on the line. So planners will just check in with them, and perhaps in the meantime, the committee would vary the agenda and consider the Denman Cross Island Trail and Lazo Greenway next.
So moved.
Doug, you're able to do that? Turn on that.
All carried. All carried.
Move 3 for receipt, please.
Second.
Move 2, Denman Cross Island Trail. Thanks, Doug.
Carried.
Excuse me. Thank you. Through the chair, this is an update for information purposes regarding the Denman and Island Cross Island Trail. But the particular section is between Owl Crescent and Gravelly Bay Ferry Terminal. Just wanted to note that it would complete a 3.5 kilometer section of the trail with a total project cost estimated about $700,000, of which we've received $491,000 from a federal grant. Additionally, that's only a bit, well, up to $491,000 because it's 70% of those capital costs. There's been community works put towards this project as well. So we're hoping to move forward with this based on a statutory right-of-way agreement we've signed with the property owners and a completed trail design and, of course, the Ministry of Transportation permits moving forward here in 2022, which we'd completed. And we'll be looking at finishing off the contribution agreements with the governments and then looking at finishing the project by the end of December or March 31st, being the latest date we'll finish with the grant application there. So staff can report back on how this progresses. Otherwise, you'll just see it progressing on the island, and we'll continue conversations a little bit as well with the BC ferries, but we plan on moving ahead. We can take any questions at this time.
Director Robert. Thank you. Obviously, some really good news that the province is willing to invest 500,000 towards the project on Denman Island. This is a project that the CVRD and the community started over 10 years ago under, I think, Director Jolliffe provided a lot of steam for this at the time, as well, of course, as our parks department. And when I came in, I did say that I wanted to see a little bit more money coming from outside than just, we used to mostly use community works. I thank you for that project. So fantastic that under active transportation, we're getting this type of support from the province at 70% funding. My only question for staff is, or question/comment is, obviously between the last meeting and this meeting, there's been a lot of community concern about the Gravelly Bay Ferries project, and which will eventually led BC Ferries to peel back and kind of go back to the drawing board on it. So the comment portion is that we will definitely want to make sure that we have deep community engagement on the project before we put shovel in the ground. And so, because it's all the same affected area that we'll be working in, I don't think there's impact for us to the extent of, but I just want to double check that we're not going to the north of Al Crescent. I think we're just staying to the south of it. And second, when you say further engagement with BC Ferries, did you hear from them since then? Or basically, I think they might have just dropped back in the background for now. I'm just not sure. I don't know if staff has information to share on that.
With particular to the new consultation process with the community and our role in that, we have not, I have not knowledge of hearing of that. Our parks manager may have heard more, but I'm not familiar with that. I'm familiar with the conversation, but not in that extent. We've mainly been working with the contractor for the most part, the BC Ferries hired, to understand where synergies may exist through that relationship as well.
Thank you for the feedback. One additional chair. This is the area affected is exactly the same area and the same people that are in the Graham Lake Improvement District. So I guess I would say in the next few months we'll have plenty of engagement with that neighborhood on two very important topics to their neighborhood. So I look forward to that.
So vote on receipt of report then. Carried. Thank you.
Now.
Next item. Mr. Grease, the second.
Oh, okay, thank you. Through the chair. This is an operational update as well on the Lazo Greenway multi-use project. In this instance, we just referred to the Denman Trail where they were able to get the BC Active Transportation Grant. Here instead at Lazo, we were able to secure a federal grant, which is eligible up to 60% of the total costs. And we're working through this, finalizing the design here along this. It really looks at both the town of Comox and Electoral Area B and the trail corridor through there. We've been working closely with the town of Comox, and we're looking at drawing up a understanding of how the federal grant money will be allocated fairly, and additionally reconfirming the project leads on this trail development, as there's been a change in staffing in both departments. Basically, we are again looking at getting the proposal out for tendering for construction in 2023 here, spring, summer. And again, looking to have it completed this year with the addition of the deadline of the federal grant, similar to the provincial grant of being March 31st, sorry, 2025. So we do have an additional year for the federal grant. Staff may report back on some progress as this continues to unfold, if need be. Otherwise, we will be moving forward with the projected timeline.
Director Grease.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the strength in our application was due to the fact that we did have partnership in the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure and with the town of Comox. And I just encourage the Comox Valley to work together like that to gain these kind of accesses to federal money. And especially in view of this, the fact that we are all committed to active transportation, and it is contingent on support from senior government, in this case, the province. But I do appreciate the fact that the federal government looked at it favorably, and we're moving forward in this. It's huge. I've been watching it every time I drive through Plateau Road. I see a little more being done. So it's going to be just lovely when it's finished.
All right, vote on receipt or report. All in favor, carried.
Recommendation. There is one. That was just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, move one.
Two. Next one's F2.
I'm going to be there. Oh, man. Who's the last one on the agenda then? Second.
Carried.
And Mr. Chair and directors, Don True will, or is it Jody? Jody McLean will present this report, and I believe the applicant is on the phone. We just need to confirm that they are. Yes. Thanks, Jody.
Thanks, Jody. Thank you. Through the CEO to the chair and the directors here. So in September 2022, this committee considered an application to rezone a 20-hectare lot on Forbidden Plateau, so it could be subdivided into four lots for residential purposes. Staff recommended refusal, citing concerns with the Forbidden Plateau roads, limited emergency access, the area being beyond the capabilities of any fire service area to cover, and placing additional residential density adjacent to a working forestry landscape. This committee requested some further consideration of the fire protection options. So there was a feasibility study done in this area. So there's no fire service, and the fire service ends at that gravel paved road intersection. And beyond up the mountain there's no fire service area. Back in 2018, a feasibility study was done on providing those fire service by DeFaro West Consulting and Left Side Partners in consultation with that Plateau Road community. And as noted in that report, the Courtenay Fire Protection District has twice in the last 10 years refused a request to expand their service boundary any further up that road, and creating a new CVRD local service area for firefighting purposes or fire prevention purposes did not receive support. There was also a possibility of a community-led approach, and this involves having a non-governmental group organize and deliver efforts that advance fire protection initiatives. And those may include items like acquiring and maintaining equipment, basic firefighting training for volunteers, education of residents, fundraising, and so forth. Things that are consistent to advance their goals of that organization. As part of their application, the owners are offering a community amenity package that's consistent of a deep well reservoir and appropriate staging grounds for firefighting purposes. As there's no fire service in this area, the CVRD is not in a position to accept this donation, but the Plateau Road Residents Association is willing to consider it. For them, a better understanding of the specifics and associated future obligations to the organization would need to be considered before they could provide a commitment. Pursuant to the board and OCP policies on community amenity contributions, before staff can commit resources to being involved in such negotiations, the board must be first satisfied that underlying proposal demonstrates sound planning practice. In this case, staff is recommending refusal of the application, that this area is appropriately zoned for low density 20-hectare lots Mr. Chair, that this area with poor emergency access serviced by one long single road up the mountain with only one point of connection to the road network at the Piercy Road intersection should not have its residential density increased before appropriate fire protection service can be established and proven out. Thank you.
Any comments, questions? Director Harbour?
Yeah, I want to thank staff for their analysis. I found very little to disagree with in the staff report. So yeah, I guess I'll be supporting the staff recommendation.
Director B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, although I have a mixed mind on this application. Obviously, the deciding factor is the lack of egress from the site. That being said, I do think that the Plateau Road Association and the property owner should be encouraged somehow to work together to expand the availability of wildfire fighting apparatus storage and water availability in that area, because we know that fire can go uphill pretty quick. And if there's no way out, you're going to have to fight it. So I know we did a big 2016, I think we did the original report around fire service in this area. And it was just way too prohibitively expensive to actually talk about a fire department, what have you. But there are a number of people living on that mountain that work in resource industry, and some even have their certificate in wildfire fighting. So I would encourage staff to work with the area association to see what we can come up with that would benefit everybody if and when we have a wildfire in that area, because it's pretty probable that one day it might happen. So yeah, so I am disappointed to see that piece of it go. I think we should try to hold on to it somehow, whatever it takes. Thanks.
I understand that the applicants are online, so we have Sonia and Barry Matheson. Anybody want to have a chance to provide some comments or input there?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me all
Thank
right?
you. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, we would like to speak. First of all, I'd like to good afternoon, directors and committee members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding our rezoning application. First of all, we'd like to congratulate Mr. Hardy on his newly appointed directorship, and also to Director Arbor and Director Grieve on their re-election. We'd like to address the key denial points here contained in the staff report dated March 2nd, 2023. Can you hear me okay?
We can, Mr. Matheson.
Very good, thank you. Our first denial point is the increase in residential density. Now, it's very frustrating that our rezoning request to potentially add 6 more homes on our 50 acres is a major point for denial. Just below us and also above us on Forbidden Plateau Road are 5-acre parcels, which already allow 2 houses to be constructed on them. We are just asking to put 2 houses on each 10 acres of land. Part of the density concern was additional traffic on Forbidden Plateau Road. We discussed this topic at great length in our last meeting, providing actual vehicle numbers utilizing Forbidden Plateau Road being in the hundreds every day during the spring and the summer seasons last year. We realized the majority of the traffic utilizing Forbidden Plateau Road derives from recreational and commercial vehicles. At our last meeting, Mr. Grieve suggested that it might be an option to limit each of the 4 proposed lots to 1 residential dwelling instead of 2 in order to minimize the impact of residential density. While it is hard to comprehend that the increase in density with our proposed rezoning would be considered to be a key denial point by the staff. We respectfully request Mr. Greaves' suggestion be implemented if need be. Our second point of denial we would like to address is the limited emergency access. Our previous application in June 2019 was denied partly by applying policy 23, stating our application had inconsistencies with the OCP. Access and egress was viewed to apply to all of Forbidden Plateau Road as opposed to our specific lot. We have 3 access and egress points on our lot in case of an emergency. We sought legal advice on this, and a letter was provided stating that 4 previous rezoning applications during the years of 2019 and 2020 on dead-end roads were approved by the CVRD without applying policy 23, and therefore use of this policy specific to our application was neither legal, reasonable, or fair. It appears that this denial point has now been reworded to state limited emergency access, as opposed to applying policy 23 specifically. How is this fair? You are still implying the same principle, and yet other areas have limited emergency access have been approved in the past. Obviously, the limited emergency access was also not applied to the 4 previous rezoning applications. We also want to re-mention the campground on a 5-acre parcel that was approved 5 kilometers further up Forbidden Plateau Road from our lot. Why would this be allowed if limited emergency access is a key denial point for property development on Forbidden Plateau Road? Why is any development being allowed on Forbidden Plateau Road if limited emergency access is such a major factor in the planning process? The next 2 items of denial refer to the property being outside the core settlement areas and in the vicinity of a working landscape, being forestry. The core settlement areas are viewed by many as overpopulated and undesirable, which is why families are seeking to build in the rural, quiet areas of Forbidden Plateau. What other areas are left to develop in the Comox Valley that do not border a working landscape, be it forestry or agriculture? And the last point is the fire protection community amenity contribution. Staff report states that the CVRD did not specifically request the CAC we are offering. This approach was taken by us for a few reasons. One is to support the community we live in from potential loss of life and assets. And 2 is that lack of fire protection was a key denial point in our 2018 rezoning request. A letter from the PRRA with full support of this initiative formed part of our current application. There was a notation in the most recent staff report stating it was not clear whether the PRRA is lending support to administer and own the program. We advised staff February 15th of 2023 that the PRRA confirmed they can take ownership and operation of any assets associated with this project. We also shared the 2018 fire prevention study and our CAC with several Forbidden Plateau neighbors, as suggested by the PRRA, with very positive feedback. Pursuing a community-led approach, as suggested in the recent staff report, not only supports our rezoning request, but shows the community at large that the long-standing topic of fire protection in our area matters to the CVRD. Our focus with this rezoning proposal has always been consistent with our desire to support intergenerational living, allowing our adult children to own some land and build their homes to raise their families in an area of the Comox Valley that we have loved for over 31 years. For your information, our land ownership partner, Jim Fry, is not in attendance today as he passed away last week. Directors and committee members, we respectfully request, given the willingness of the PRRA to pursue the proposed CAC, that the board direct staff to proceed with external referrals as noted in the staff report. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Mr. Chair, can we speak again if needed?
Yeah, we do have a question here from Director Harbour first. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And of course, I want to start by offering condolences to the loss of your land partner. That's really sad news. And yeah, I'm just sending my best to you and his family. That's never easy. So sobering moment here. Yes. Thank you. In regards to the application, I also want to thank the applicant. You obviously put a lot of time and energy in presenting your points today, and I thought that was really well done. And to be honest, I thought a lot of your points were very reasonable in regards to your comments and justification for why you think this project could proceed. I think our both the staff advice and what maybe you heard from us, I don't think it's unreasonable either. I think this is one of those where it comes down a little bit to these types of rezonings are always a matter of trying to balance different things between all the way from the RGS to the zoning bylaws to what makes sense for the community. And yeah, I recognize you have a lot of valid points, but I also think that some of the reasons for looking at forbidden, I can't talk about past practices like you know, how the development up there happened in the first place and the whole history. But as I'm sure you heard from our staff, like the more we look at Fire Smart, the more we look at some of those risks, I think I end up still supporting, not favoring the rezoning. So I would hate to be the one who say, you know, double bad news in a week, but I thought you had some really reasonable points today, and I want to thank the applicant for putting them forward.
Director Greaves.
Yeah, I know this is a real tough one, and I'm conflicted on it for sure. You did bring out the point that you got 3 points of access on the property. One goes through your neighbor's property, it looks like, the neighbor to the west. And maybe it's just a little too early to bring this forward insofar as where the board is headed right now and what our priorities are right now. You're absolutely correct that Forbidden Plateau was quite a little community at one time with everybody had a cabin up there. And you know, it is the Wood Mountain piece is a real gem. Hopefully in the future, it might fall under the auspices of our Comox First Nation. They may choose to open it up for some recreation or what have you. But no, I share your feeling disappointment, and I just wish there was a little more supportive staff on this thing, because it is, you know, in today's climate, it's a little different than back in the 60s when we went up there and skied with Herb Bradley and all that. So yeah, I'm as I say, I'm of two minds on this. I could see it. It is a large area. I could see it maybe supporting 4 dwellings, but that would be 4 separate parcels as well. So yeah, it's a hard one for me. Thank you.
Director Harbour, do you have another comment?
Yeah, maybe can staff talk a little bit about that option of the 4 dwellings? Is it feasible? Is that something that's I mean, it's not something that would be standard in terms of the application of that. So I don't know if there's any comment, or at least, okay, let me rephrase the question. Has consideration been given to that, or just to the application before us?
Thank you. So yeah, staff's recommendation is to not advance any further residential density up there. Yeah, there is a lot of land there has zoning that's allows for other more dense development, but staff is not recommending any further beyond what's already allowed.
Thank you. Well, that brings forward a different way of looking at it. Possibly, we're talking about a large piece of property that right now can support two full-time dwellings. Maybe would it be any more acceptable to our staff if it was just the parcel was split in two, which would allow two full-size dwellings, but on two parcels? That would be a minor increase of two dwellings on that road. So would that be something maybe the applicant might consider as an alternative? I think that the parcel piece is a bit of a bugaboo because what were they, 4 hectares? Right, so that's a bit small for this area, but if they're 8 hectares and two dwellings on it, you would still be able to have a parcel title for a family member and have the two dwellings per parcel.
That would be reasonable from our perspective.
Staff won't comment, but if the applicant wants to vary their application or otherwise, we'll give consideration to that, but our recommendation still stands.
Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. And I recognize the ideas shared here. And what I also recognize is, I mean, the staff answer was pretty good to me in terms of what the context is in considering this. And maybe what I'm leaning on would be this to me would look like a new application, and so maybe for this one that's before us, I may lean on denying it, but if something comes back at a future date and then that can be considered. Yeah, that's the way I'm leaning right now, Chair. Thanks.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Jody or Ton that if the applicant were going to vary their application, would it be preferable that the committee just defer comment until they come back, or rather than denying it this time?
Through the CO to the chair. For staff right now, we're focused on the application itself, and staff has done a lot of work on this application. If their applicant decides to come forward again with a new application, we would focus on that application itself. This application here is requesting that a rezoning for purpose of subdivision for 4 lots. If he or she decides to come back at a later date and amend the application, that could be a whole different type of application and information that we might want moving forward with the application.
Thank you. And so through the chair and the CAO, then would it be best that the applicant withdraw the application at this point? Or would it be best for us just to defer it to a future meeting? I think that's the question, because I'd be willing to defer it to a future meeting and give the applicant a chance to get his head and her head around this. and because so much work's been done already that a change like that is substantive, and it may actually be supportable.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Staff would recommend that we proceed with this application. If the applicant decides to move forward with an amendment or a new application, staff would work with the applicant to see if we can reuse some of their information that was submitted to us.
Thanks. What about the cost factor, though? All the money is put up so far. Does that all get lost if we turn down this application?
Through the chair to Director Grieve, we do have a fees and procedure bylaw. The fees and procedure bylaw provides us with some criteria and what percentage can be refunded back to the applicant. The fact that this application went to the committee a couple of times already is over the 75% mark. So I think at the most, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there will be very minimal refund left for the applicant.
Mr. Chair, what I suggest is maybe if the committee not make a decision on it at this time, and we will come back with an explanation as to what the options may be or what the implications will be at your next meeting.
So then, yes, then we'll just receive it as a report and turn it back over to as a deferral to staff.
I would just receive and leave it at that, and we'll come back to you with anything that changes or what the implications are at the next meeting.
So folks, it's sort of like the faint hope clause for the condemned man. Thank you.
So vote and receive report. All in favor, carried.
Move termination, I guess.
No.
Oh, hold on.
We gotta go back to him.
Thank you, Mr. Is it Malthouse?
Netition.
Netition?
Netition.
Netition. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time as well. Thank you.